Hello, Super Duty friends. This is my 99 F250. I had this car for a couple of years now, spending almost 1 year getting it back on the road. It was a project, and well, I guess it's always going to be a project, but now it's at least in a usable, pretty good condition. I'm one of those individuals who have had these cars several periods in my life. I had them when they were new, about 2000, and I liked them a lot, and I was, having other trucks and cars in my life, and then I just, I wanted a car that could pull some weight, and over here in Europe there's not so much to choose between if you want to pull some heavy trailer and stuff, so yeah, I got this truck. So one of the problems that many have with these trucks is that the calipers are seizing up. Especially here up in Northern Europe, we are salting the roads, and it's not making things any better. However, I think that having the plastic pistons in the calipers isn't really helpful. This is one of these plastic pistons that was inside the caliper. On my right hand side, I put new brakes on it, brake pads and discs and everything, and on my first drive I felt that there was heat. It was heating up, and so I popped the piston, and it's still smooth. I couldn't feel anything wrong with it, but I figured that I was going to try to do something else and just, replace the caliper as everybody else seemed to be doing. So after a whole lot of measuring, I did find a steel piston that is just about the same. The critical dimensions are the same as you see here on the top. It's a little bit different, but I've already been driving around with one of these steel pistons in my caliper for a few months now, maybe 6 months, and the gasket, it fits, even though there is a little bit of difference in the dimension of this groove here. I'm going to talk a little bit more about dimensions when I get inside, but first we're going to open up the caliper and fit this second piston and see how it looks inside there. So here I have taken off the wheel and popped the caliper, and as you see, I am running one steel piston on the left and one of the old plastic ones on the right. As you see on the steel one that I put in there, the gasket fits nicely, and yeah, we're gonna remove the other plastic one and fit the second steel piston. I've been doing this as an experiment to see how it was working, and well, I haven't been using the car for maybe that severe duty conditions, but I have been pulling trailers with about 3 tons, and yeah, had about 700-800 kilo on the bed in addition to that. So it has seen some pulling and some heat, and it has been working great for me. Now let's pull out the plastic piston and put the steel one in there. So I put a piece of steel over where the steel piston is, which I want to keep in there. And now I'm going to pump the plastic piston a bit further out. I'm not going to pop it like that, but I'm going to get a little bit further out before I put a vice grip or something on the hose to keep the fluid from from flowing out of there. Now I got it out of there, and need to clean up the board a little bit with some brake cleaner, and we can start putting the steel one inside. Here you can see what the steel piston looks like when I got the gasket on there. As you see, even the dimension on the piston on the groove is a little bit different. It fits nicely around. There's like no, and even when it's flexing back and forth, there's no issues. So we're gonna pop this in now. So I put the piston back in with the gasket in place, and of course when you're pushing the piston in, you're forcing actually air into the system, but because I blocked it here, it doesn't get that much further, and so we're going to open the bleeder screw. So we're going to let out the air, and we can push the piston all the way in. Like that, came some air out of it. You can push this in by hand. Both of these move pretty easily. So now I'm gonna put the caliper back in place, and I'm just going to let the air breathe out. I'll be back for that. So now the caliper is back in place, and I will now open the bleeder screw so that the air can start removing itself, and I will open also the vice grip there, and that will cause the system to bleed itself just by gravity. So I'll keep an eye on when the oil starts coming out of the bleeder screw there. Take a couple of minutes maybe or something, but when it comes out there, then the caliper is full of brake fluid. You can actually hear the sound of air venting out there, so it should fill itself pretty quickly. Yeah, here it comes. So we're closing the breathing screw now. So before we get into the sizing and the dimensions of the pistons here, I would like to make a disclaimer, meaning that I do not take any responsibility for you fitting the parts that I talk about here. You have to do your own measurements and check if everything is within spec. You are the king of your own life, and you definitely want to, double check and be in charge of the braking system and its functions the way it should do. There are a number of variants. You might have remanufactured calipers, they might have been honed to another spec, to another oversize, or whatever. These are things that you need to take into consideration when you're doing this. So please keep everything in check, and if you know that this is above your level of understanding, then you can have a shop to it. It's many possibilities. Okay, so let's look at how the brake system works. So this is the brake line coming from the pedal. The brake fluid goes in here, distributes to both pistons, and as you apply pressure, it starts to push the pistons, which push on the brake pad, which presses on the disc, which slows the car down or stops it. Now, as the fluid is pressing on the piston, it's also pressing on this little O-ring here. This is a square O-ring which goes around the piston, and as the hydraulic pressure here, it starts to deform the O-ring as the piston is being pressed outwards. When you release the brake pedal, the O-ring wants to return to its natural state, and it pulls the piston with it backwards, and thus you release the pressure on the pads and the discs will start to move freely again. There is a certain tolerance which is supposed to be here. Of course, I have exaggerated the look of it just for the purpose of this explanation, but the plastic pistons, they run typically a looser tolerance between the bore than a steel piston should have. So when we're changing the piston, we want to put a slightly bigger steel piston in there. So I managed to find the exact dimension of the plastic pistons online, and the two critical dimensions is pretty much piston diameter and the length of it. You don't want to put a very short piston in there, because then there's a risk of it popping out or something like this. You want to be close to this dimension. The diameter you want to increase to have it in a tolerance which is suitable for the steel piston. Now the steel pistons that we put in there is 54 millimeters, or it's at least advertised as 54 millimeters. I think it's just below, but it's advertised as 54 millimeters. And the length of the piston, there are some variations here, but you do get one which is 58.5, which is very close to this dimension. The one I put in there is actually 59, which, you know, in total for the two pistons gives for a 1.16 millimeter less room for the pads, if you wish. It was okay in my application. I have new pads, I have new discs. It wasn't a problem, but I do know that disc size varies and pad size certainly varies between manufacturers. So am I going to guarantee that it's going to work out perfectly for you? No, I'm not going to do that. You're going to have to do your own math, but at least this piston here, which has a 58.5 millimeter height, this is so close to the 58.42 which we have here, that should be okay in probably in any application. But again, I'm not going to guarantee it. Here's a part number for that particular pistons. It's used in Audi, Seat, Skoda, Volkswagen. It's used in a lot of A3s. I think they used it in almost that line exclusively for years and years, and for almost all the horsepower outputs. So you can look into that. The piston that I used, I'm going to show you a picture of that now. It's called Budweg. It has a number 235461, and it's just another variant of the pistons used for this. And that kind of concludes my video for the brake caliper piston replacement or upgrade, or whatever you want to call it. Be sure to check your brake fluid to top it off to see that it's enough in the container. I'd like to talk about another thing too while we're here, and that is take care of your family, take care of your friends in these difficult times, and learn from your children. And I'll give you an example of something I learned. I asked my son a question here the other day, and it turned out to be a real stupid question as well. He has two close friends that he's playing with a lot, and I, out of the blue, just asked him which one he liked better. And he just replied, "I love them both." And then I realized that this separation and differences that we as grown-ups are very into, and us and them and all these kind of things, is just bullshit. And I also realized why my son has such a difficulty in choosing when I take him to the toy shop and he gets to pick out a car, let's say a 50s die-cast car, quite expensive, so we're only gonna buy one. But he has a difficulty choosing because they're all beautiful, they're all nice, and he would like to have them all because they're all beautiful. There's no separation, there's no ugliness, they're all beautiful. So take some time with your kids and learn something. Thank you.